Hey there, and welcome to the Fedora Podcast. This is episode number 45. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a developer? Are you interested in learning how to code? Well, I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and on today's episode, we'll discuss those very questions. But first, we can't move forward without introducing my on location co host, Mr. Noah C. What's up, Noah?
Hey man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate you accommodating me being mobile today.
Yeah, no worries. Where are you at? What are you up to?
I am working at a church, and you can see one of the Altispeed wizards behind me, and he is collecting parts off of that there rack. And I tell you what, today is a day that you're thankful for all of the little pieces and all the little gadgets that keep everything organized.
I hear that. So today we're talking about how to contribute to open source, how to get started with an open source community, what it's like to do development work. And we actually had a volunteer from the Fedora community step up and ask to kind of talk on this subject. So without further ado, let me bring in Mark. Mark, welcome to the Fedora Podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for work, what you do for fun?
Okay, well, that's tough. What do I do for work these days? My official title is Senior Site Reliability Engineer. I work for an online bank and I take care of continuous integration and compliance part of things, which involves a lot of different technologies, connectivity, security topics. It's very broad. And I have a background on system administration and Linux in general. That's it's mostly my work. And what do I do for fun? Well, these days, mostly play with my dog. Every evening, I have like a 45-minute session playing with him. But no, jokes aside, I like doing sports, going on hikes. I used to do a lot of rock climbing. These days, not so much. Berlin is not really close to any mountain. But yeah, that's mostly what I do. And of course, contribute to Fedora KDE.
Awesome.
Can Can you talk a little bit about how you got started with the Fedora community?
How did I get started? Actually, I was thinking about this before we started the show, and I don't remember exactly how I got into it. I remember in one of my jobs we were using CentOS, and then I thought it would be a good idea to get familiar with the packaging system because I came from other systems like Debian packaging or Gentoo even or Arch Linux. I was a very heavy Arch Linux user at the time, but I switched to Fedora because I was thinking, well, you know what? I'm seeing that the industry is going systemd mostly, and then I switched or I started looking into Fedora, and then I saw Rex Dieter, I think it's pronounced. He was essentially doing all the packaging for KDE on Fedora, and I was amazed at what the stuff that he was doing and how knowledgeable he was. And then I started just trying to see what he was doing. Just when he had some time, he was explaining me, yeah, I'm doing a rebuild here, I'm doing that, and I was like, okay, yeah, but what is this? This is like magic. He was doing some scripting and some bash shell scripts and some, and I was super surprised. And he showed me a bunch of things, and then eventually he granted me access to some repository. I think the first one was Amarok, the music player, and from there on, I started with packaging on Fedora. Then sometime after that, Dan Fratil, I think it's pronounced. He had some scripts he had done himself to build Fedora packaging, mostly KDE packages. And then I kind of took over those scripts and did a bunch of refactoring and make them more maintainable or user friendly because there were some scripts that were just put together by himself to do stuff on his own computer. And now we are all using this on the KDE SIG to build all the packages. We have I don't know, 400 something packages. So it works pretty well actually. So this is mostly my story with Fedora. It's mostly connecting to packaging, but once you get into the packaging for KDE, you are immediately involved with dealing with some bugs, user requests, um, talking to upstream, reporting. Look, I have a user saying this, and I tested this, and maybe we can develop this feature to fix this other problem. And we have a very healthy community these days in KDE and a good
Mm,
connect with upstream. It's cool. It's a nice team.
that's awesome. So what drew you to development in the first place? You talk about packaging and CI pipelines, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But what got you into coding? What was it about writing code that really spoke to you?
The ability to create things that you can use yourself. So you have a
Mm,
need, and then you just do it yourself and you put it there. One of the last things that I did a few months ago was contribute to a Tmax plugin, and it's something silly, but I wanted to be able to use a specific shortcut to trigger some functionality from this plugin, and then I just did a pull request with adding some extra features, and the main developer was super receptive um, to the pull request, and we did some changes, and then it was introduced. It's for me the ability that software gives us to implement things that we need is fantastic.
mm,
It's and easy, and it costs like everybody can do it. Anybody who has access to a laptop that it's fairly cheap these days, you can buy a computer that you can use for what 150 200 euros. In Europe or in the US, essentially everybody can get access to a computer.
So let's talk about that for a second. So there's somebody has access to a computer and they say to themselves, I have an interest in software development, or maybe it doesn't start with something from scratch, right? Because it's typically helpful if we can kind of scratch an itch. And so if you can go maybe get involved with something that already exists, or maybe you do have a thing that you want to just take on from the start. How do you go about recommending tools for somebody to get started with coding? Is that something that you would say focus on the concepts because you'll be able to translate those into particular tools? Would you say try all of them or try all of the languages, or be open to all of them? How do you navigate that?
Well, in my experience, the first thing that you have to do is understand your limitations and your resources. Because, like, when I talk resources, sometimes it's just time. Like maybe you just have 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week to deal with these things. So that's the first thing that you should know, and also your own capabilities. Some people are just not as intelligent as others, and I myself included. Sometimes I see some of my colleagues doing something, and like, my God, you did this in 2 hours. It would take me 3 days, 4 days to do this. And the other thing, for me, the easiest is to get into some software that you use and try to contribute something, even if something is very small, even is the silliest thing. It will just get you into the flow of knowing the people who works on the project, the technologies that are used, even if it's just one line. One of the things I did 20 years ago that I was super proud of was testing some um, Linux drivers for a laptop, and then I suggested a change, not a change, adding a line to the Linux kernel, and it's there. It was just an identifier for my laptop, and then since then it was there and it worked. Something super silly will get you started into the most interesting things. And really, for me, the easiest is to get some software that you like, KDE in this case, for example. You have some application that you want to contribute, and talk to the maintainers. Uh,
So
Go ahead.
can you walk us through a little bit, like what was that project for you? What was the thing that you got an interest in that allowed you your foot in the door to kind of start building? What did that look like, building that ground level?
Oof, to be honest, I wouldn't be able to say anything specific because I was looking into many different projects,
Yeah.
and sometimes you start looking into this one and then you find that it's too complicated For example, I remember contributing to this browser, Reconc, some time ago on KDE, and I did something, but it wasn't C++. I do not like the language too much, and I it requires time and effort to really be fluent on C++, and then I just switched to some other project. And yeah, until you get into some language that just suits you, maybe that's also something you need to consider. Like I tried C++, it's just not for me. I have developed some stuff, but it's not for me. And then Python is very nice in my experience. It's very easy and rewarding to newcomers because it's very easy to read, and there's a lot of documentation online, tutorials, good practices on Python. However, it's for big projects, it's not the best thing.
Why?
But I'm deviating, right? So you were asking
Well, no. Actually, you're right. You're spot on. So okay. So I'm a potential developer. I want to get interested in it, and I start thinking to myself, where do I start? Python is not an uncommon answer. In fact, our computer science department at our local university shifted from doing Java over to Python. So again, that resonates with me. What I guess my question was, how does one judge when you get to the end of Python's capabilities and you need to move on to something else? Can you help me understand what that scope difference is? And then can you help parallel that with me with how much work it is to move from one language to another? Is it, hey, it's the syntax is a little different, but the concepts really translate easily from one to another, so that's really easy? Or is it, no, you really want to start developing your skills in the area you want to wind up and really sharpen the sword there because it's difficult to move around? Which of those
Well,
are more accurate?
it depends. I would say it depends on how deep you want to go, because uh, uh, if you really want to do complex things, you end up having to know how computers work at the deep level. So if you want to go that far, Python is probably not the language that you want to use eventually, because it's really like Python is an interpret language, right? So you always have some interpreter in the middle. You're not compiling, and
Uh-huh.
you can go fairly deep on Python doing certain things, but it will never be as close to bare metal as C would, or C++, or Rust, right? Or even Go. But I would say that that's like kind of a far away for any person who starts on development. With Python, you can, like, it's a Turing complete language. You can do everything on Python, literally. Like, you really can do anything that you need from a computer. It might
So
not be as straightforward with other languages, but you can do everything.
So is it accurate to say then it's a language that there isn't, it is not necessarily the size of your project, it's the complexity of the code. As you need more advanced complexity and you want to do more things with great specificity, maybe that is a time to move to another language. But what I'm hearing you say is Python is a great place to get started. It'll carry you a good long way into a development career if that's something
Oh,
you were
for
interested
sure.
in.
Python, not only as a learning tool, but also in industry. Python is used heavily everywhere. If you look into data science, come on, which
Yes.
data scientist is not using Python? Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Python's
Python,
really,
you cannot go wrong with Python, seriously.
yeah, it's
It
made a
has its
resurgence
uses.
in the last 10 years or so, with especially with the outbreak of data science, and a lot of things like Ansible uses Python underneath the covers. Things like a lot of the AI models are being built to run within Python environments. Um, so if you're looking for a language that'll take you a long ways, or at least give you an introduction into the space, I think Python is a great place to start. Um, Disclaimer: not a developer. YAML is my preferred programming language, if not Markdown. Um, but uh, but I mentioned Markdown intentionally because there's folks out there that want to get involved, that want to be part of a project, that want to help a particular application develop. I know it sounds kind of cliched, but one of the best places to start is documentation, writing things down, cleaning up formatting. If anything, that'll at least get you used to the whole code repository, git pull, git push, creating a pull request. It'll at least get you identified with some of the tools and terminology.
Definitely.
So we mentioned Python as a potential place to start as a programming language, and in fact, there is a Fedora distribution, lab distribution for Python. And so
Mhm.
what this is, and I'll have to track down the URL. But if you look at Fedora Labs, there's a lab for Python that comes with all the interpreters, all the languages, or all the libraries, not languages, that comes with Python, comes with the libraries, comes with the interpreters, um, to allow you to start getting used to working with Python. Um, I've wanted to download it. It looks really cool, but it's a learning environment for learning how to run Python applications, and it's built on top of the Fedora distribution. So the Fedora Python lab is a great place to start.
I could also recommend a couple of courses from Coursera, this platform to learn. I tried a couple of Python courses, and I found them very interesting. Some of the teachers were guiding very well on how to put your brain into programming mode, into learning how to use and how to approach design of Python code based on the problem that you're tackling. So I don't have any specific course to recommend, but have a look if somebody's interested into doing that. Many of them are for free. So regarding the documentation, you guys are right, especially with Python. There's a lot of documentation, well-written documentation with many examples. With other languages, not so much. But with Python, it's perfect. It's really nice tool, Python.
Yeah, you mentioned Coursera, and then the one I've taken some Kubernetes courses from is Udemy. Udemy
Yeah,
runs some pretty crazy specials every month,
correct.
and a lot of them are new coding courses as well. So
Fun
definitely a
fact,
lot of resources.
I got my Kubernetes certification after doing a Udemy course.
Nice. Nice. I'm about a third of the way through that course, and I haven't touched it in about 6 months. So I probably
Oh
should
no,
start over
I
at
did
this
it
point.
full in, like 3 days of course. Boo, 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 boo.
We might have to talk about that offline, or I swear the show needs like a hangout afterwards. But um, so let me copy. We'll put a couple of links in the show notes. And Noel Miller is in the background typing frantically, providing us with links and helping produce the show today. So thanks to Noel. We'll make sure to add the Coursera and Udemy links to the show notes. I think one of the things we could do, and we had a question in the chat about this, was I want to get involved. I want to code. I want to write things, but I get confused with GitHub. So, Mark, maybe you could do us a favor, and when you sit down, I'm going to take a few of the things off of our episode guide here and kind of squish them into one for you. You sit down. There's an issue in GitHub. There's a project you're working on. Someone reported an issue. There's a bug, and so you go and you look at the code. Kind of walk us through that process. What does it look like to open that issue? What tools are you touching as you start to write, as you start to use code, or as you start to actually code? What's the process and the tools that you're kind of walk us through your workflow there?
Well, the first thing before you actually do any looking at code, it's trying to understand the issue. And sometimes that's the hardest part, because not everybody is as familiar with the technology that you use or the project that you're developing, and then the user doesn't know how to communicate their problem or the issue they're having. So the first thing is try to understand exactly what they need, or what they're facing. That's the most important part. And the next step, it depends on how fluent you are with the project and how much of an expert you are, because eventually you develop certain kind of intuition And depending on it, yeah, I think this might be on that direction. And then you know already where to go on the code because you're familiar with it. But uh, I guess after understanding the issue that you're reading, it would be trying to reproduce it. If you cannot reproduce the issue, it's it's like a lost battle. You're going
Like
blind.
taking your car to the mechanic and saying it's making that noise, but it's not making that noise right now. How do you troubleshoot it? How do you fix it? How do
Yeah,
you
the
identify the
mechanic is
problem?
lost. It's like, yeah, when I drive the car, it makes a noise, and then he goes out, and there's no noise. Uh huh. What are you gonna do? Look at all the pieces of the car? I mean, you can do that, but it's not the most efficient way of dealing with the problem, right? Um,
I want
mhm.
I want to give a quick shout out. So Zane, who asked that question, he threw out his call sign M7EWW. So I want to say 73s as a fellow ham, as a fellow lover of music and photography and aviation and computers, and we share ham. The fact that there's my bro in England, I just want to say thank you for that question. Um, Talk to me a little bit about when you are trying to achieve a specific objective. So somebody comes to you and they say, "Hey, I've got this very specific bug, or I've got this very specific feature that I'm looking for."
So hold on, can you repeat what would be the question there?
What does your typical flow look like when you're targeting a bug or feature?
Well, first thing is depending on my energy and how important the issue is. You need to prioritize. Uh, that's the first step. The I'm very direct when I feel in the mood, and I see like sometimes there's a Saturday that you just feel like doing this, and then you just go through it, and you just go in, boom. I feel like doing this. Okay, boom.
Mhm.
In my experience, that's the best way with open source communities, with communities and projects, because most of the time you don't get paid for that stuff. And then the most important thing that you can get is motivation. And running into troubleshooting or fixing some bugs that are relatively low importance, or you consider that it's low importance, it's- it doesn't motivate much. So once you get a feeling of ownership on some software, then you will also deal with those kind of bugs. But you usually prioritize what you want to fix or help people with. Mm, and then seriously, I go straight into it. Uh, Depending on how complex it is, you can just fix it and adjust whatever code is. But if it's something that you can see some potential, you will do some refactoring, and then you cannot just go straight into the battle. You need to take a step back and then think, okay, if I want to implement this, will I need to change certain parts of the code? Will it affect others? Will I break some API or slash ABI that I will need a new major release? All these things need to be put into consideration, and depends on how your project develops, you will go one way or the other. If you just go into, okay, I will just increase the major version and it's not a problem for you, sure, go ahead. Or if you use semantic versioning and you're still on zero, you can do whatever you want because you're still on zero. You can break API on every minor release if you want. There's so many things to consider on any project. It's hard to give you a clear answer on how to tackle um, a problem. And on many occasions, it's very simple. There's like an issue, and you just go there. Oh, yeah, I didn't check this.
Okay, how about this? How about can you help me understand from a developer standpoint, if I'm using a piece of software that you've worked on and I'm struggling with something, what are the basic ways that I can communicate? Hey, here's where I'm running into an error, and yet it doesn't like blow everything out of your day, but at the same time you have all the information that you need to be able to go in and solve the problem.
Let's see if I got you. So you would like to know?
So, how do I tell you as a developer, here's the problem I'm having without, like, if I give you all the information, if I'm like, here's all the things I clicked on and all the things I do, perhaps it's information overload and doesn't really help you sort through it. At the same time, if
No,
I don't,
no, 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 no,
no,
no.
no,
As
that's a
much
mistake. Always.
information as much information as possible. Always. Please.
Okay.
Always.
Okay. The more
Always.
information, the better.
Yes, you cannot imagine how many times I faced discussions with, yes, because I triggered this and then it doesn't work. Okay, what command specifically did you use to trigger this? And then they give you an answer. It's like, yeah, but you realize that the right command is this other one. Oh, right, now it works. Everything, absolutely everything. I fire up my computer, I press on the icon here, you put a screenshot of the icon, and then I get this pop-up with this message, and I click on this thing, and this happened. Like, really, you cannot be verbose enough.
Mm.
Seriously.
The more information, the better. Got it. I will make the change, sir. Juan says, I'm a second year computer science student. I eventually would like to get into web dev. Could I contribute in some way? I've been using Fedora for many years, but I feel guilty in a way. I should give back. What would you tell a second year computer science student who wants to get involved in web development? And is there an open way? Is there somebody that could come alongside him from the Fedora community to say, hey, yeah, we've got some web stuff that we need dev on?
Yes, please.
Fedora.
We need the help.
Yeah.
Yes, always. The help is always welcome, even the smallest thing possible. In Fedora, well, I'm not involved in web kind of things, but I do know that Fedora develops internal tools, and for sure we can do interesting things with web developers, even if it's just contributing. What was I using the other day? The Copper API.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't know. Do you consider that web developer? It's more backend development, right? But like maybe the Copper needs some extra functionality on. I don't
Here's the
know.
thing, the motivation, he says, is a second year computer science student. He would like to eventually get into web dev, but he says, can I contribute in any way? I read that to say, you know what, if there's some way that I can give back, I want to do that. And I'm a computer science student, so certainly there's something I could dev on or hack on that would be beneficial to Fedora. That's the way that I read that. Yeah, here we go. And he follows up and says, could be just improving documentation. Okay.
Yeah, look, Bruno is a colleague of mine. Yeah, seriously, everybody, do not underestimate how big of a deal is every contribution is valuable. I did a pull request 2 weeks ago just to fix a typo on the Copper documentation. Just a typo. Just what there was. No, it's not a typo. There was a line with some parameter that was not there anymore on the function, but it was still there. So if somebody, the problem that I faced, I needed something from the Copper API, and I was triggering my script, and then I was looking at the API, the documentation, and I was like, what is this parameter? Oh, I can use this parameter. I send the parameter, and I get an error back. And I was like, huh? Then I went into the code for Copper because it's Python, good. And then I found out, like, but the function doesn't have this parameter. And then I just did the pull request with removing that parameter. Simple. And now it's gone. One of the maintainers saw it. Oh yeah, you're right. Boom, merge. It was like, once I saw the problem, it was a 3-minute thing, and then everybody now will not get confused because that parameter is not there in the documentation anymore. So everything helps. Seriously, translations, dealing with user requests, organizing meetings with a special interest group, looking at the bugs. Everything helps. Everything. Seriously.
And that's the problem with having such a spread out community like Fedora has, where there's developers in every corner of the globe, literally, where there's projects that span thousands of packages. Gosh, no, what the Fedora podcast team maybe has 4 people. I mean,
in
you and
4
I,
states.
Noel, and yeah, and a couple of other people that contribute on the back end, and yeah, like you said, we're in 4 or 5 different states, and so there's always a place to help. And one, if I can single you out for a second, bravo! I mean, that's awesome. Yes, be in school for this stuff, but find a way to contribute. Put that on your resume. you are in an amazing position to set up your career and your professional network, and you'll find it a lot more satisfying. It like I tell the story often about getting started as a sysadmin, where I didn't really get anything out of my career until I realized, oh, this open source thing is more than just a license. There's like actual people out on the interwebs I can connect with, and some of my closest friends I've met from the open source community. No one. I'll include Noah in that pile.
It's true. It's true.
K-
Like in the KDSIC, for example, um, I have fun chatting with my colleagues. Um, Even we have weekly meetings, and most of the time we're done in 20 minutes, half an hour with the topics that we have at hand. And then you don't realize it, and you spend another hour just chatting with the friends on the chat. It's
Okay,
good.
not I don't mean to be the voice of dissent here, but contrast for me then, if you will. What are the downsides to a community project? I mean, is it
Hmm.
excellent and it's just no
No,
everybody? I mean, the idea of
no.
showing up at 8 to 5 is. Tell me what are the downsides?
The downside is the internet can be a very toxic place. And
You spend
What?
all your
What?
time working on this
No.
thing, and some guy who never knew your name came onto a forum or a chat room or whatever and laid it out for you, huh?
for me, this is my personal opinion on the subject. I get sad when I see comments or requests from people who kind of demand your work or your attention, and that's so demotivating. Uh,
It's
like,
entitlement. It's entitlement. You will do this thing, and because I want it, therefore you should command your labor to give me this thing. And if it doesn't work right, I don't care if I paid anything for it. I don't care if I know your name. You should fix it, dang it. And if you don't, I'm angry, and I'll make the internet know about it. And you know what? It won't just be me. It'll be my friends and their family and
yeah,
everybody else. And I'll tell everybody how terrible of a human being you are and how terrible your project is because I had a bad experience and something didn't go my way.
I
For the
personally, luckily, have not run into that situation that I know of, because I don't read a lot of social networks and all that stuff.
Good.
I but
Keep it that way.
but I have several colleagues who have run into this, and that's very sad. Like, seriously, when you really think what's behind most of these communities and open source, yeah, there's some projects who make money out of services and things like this, but many communities do it for the fun of it, or just for the sense of contributing to society. When you get somebody who comes in this way and starts demanding things or even insulting you, I've been there. I've been insulted by something. I remember specifically the Wayland switch that we made on Fedora
Oh
KDE.
yeah.
We had some um, rough comments. I remember at some point I was even close to reporting some users to the Fedora console for the code of conduct. That was sad. I didn't. It's not a good experience. It's not a good experience. That is, for me, is the worst of the open source contributions.
Do you mind if I ask what the outcome of that was? By way of, did you end up reporting them and did it solve the problem or was it resolved a different way?
It was not solved. It kind of not die out, but the person or the couple of persons stopped being so vocal. Let's say we.
The rule of thumb is don't feed the trolls.
I mean, I
Yeah.
wouldn't call it trolls, because in one sense they have their own arguments. When they started insulting or putting words in your mouth or adding intention to your actions, then we have a problem.
Yes.
Then
We're
is
no
where there is
longer
a problem.
debating the merits or demerits about whatever it is we're talking about. Now we're just attacking people instead of thoughts or ideas.
Correctly, and that's the big issue in this particular case. For example, it was not Kevin, it was some other person, but Kevin was in the mix of people who we had issues with. He's actually banned from the KDSA for some old story topics, but we got into the kind of workaround that we added something to our scripts that notifies him of certain actions that we have done, and then he can work on its own on solving it. And then since then, it's been kind of okay. There hasn't been any other problem. So, well, it worked out. Eventually, the problem that we have with him, not with him, with the situation with the Wayland and X maintenance, it's probably going to die out because in KDE Upstream, I think it's in version 6.4, they're going to make optional the, or they're going to separate the backend Wayland and X11. And then we could be completely isolated from Kevin in this case. So he can do the maintenance on his own on the X side of things if he wants. And we can, on the KDSA, we can focus on Wayland because it's going to be out of the pipeline. So that was a lucky situation for us. But again, that's the worst part. What somebody, you said it, attacks the person. Most of us do things motivated by good intentions, right? What's this saying? Road to hell is paved with good intentions. So that can happen. Sure, that can happen. But come on, then don't attack the person. Just go, hey guys, you're doing it wrong because X, Y, Z, and then this is going to happen, and then we can have a discussion.
The other part of it is it's a more effective means to your end, right? If you're unhappy about something and you want a developer to fix it, the way to achieve that result is not to go tear them down on the internet and then with this idea that they're just, oh my gosh, I better fix it. Okay, that's not an effective means. Much more effective rather to say, hey, I really appreciate your project. I really appreciate all the things that you do. I really appreciate the fact that it allows me to do this, that, and the other. Problem I'm having is the following. How would you recommend I could help you fix that problem? And you might say, well, if you just gave me this information, I'd be happy to fix it. Sounds like the more information, the better. We learned that today, right? The other side of it is if there's a particular piece of hardware, there's a particular way that you can't replicate the scenario, all those things fall apart, but you only get to make the bad assumption about somebody's character one time, and then it's like you said, it's demoralizing. It tears apart. And so if you can just start from the place, the reason those developers put those things on the planet in the first place is because they so deeply passionately cared about those open source projects. Start from that premise and then kind of work for the shared goal, the shared win. We're all on the same team.
Yeah, if you put a smile on your face, you can achieve way more than if you go with with a bad attitude. And sometimes developers will add something to their software, even if they don't really need it. But if it's presented in a good way, in a good case, if you have a good architecture, it's easy to maintain. You can just add it. So you nailed it. Just go with a good attitude and look. I have this use case. Would it be not only but I know these other people or companies or institutions, because sometimes it comes from schools, for example, and it would be a good use case. So that's also a motivating thing, you're going to help somebody who is not a big corporation, and to me that's a good motivator. Help whoever is in need, and by your small contributions, that's big deal.
Well, and I think we missed an obvious solution as well. A lot of open source developers do it as a hobby or as a side project, even side job. There's things like sponsoring on GitHub, where you can send somebody some cash, and or like buy me a coffee links, that kind of thing, where you can say, hey, I've actually use this project as part of my business. Can I send you $50 to add this feature?
Yeah, there's campaigns, right? I don't remember the name for this. I think KDE had one or several where you can contribute to a specific feature requests with some money, and then when it reaches certain threshold, then some KDE developer will just tackle it. Something like this. That's also a very good motivator.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our time together, do you have any closing thoughts or any projects you want to draw our audience's attention to?
I would really want to encourage everybody to contribute. What I said before, really, the smallest thing helps. Seriously, translations, documentation, wikis, relations in the chat, bringing good attitude. Seriously, the smallest thing helps the project. I really want to highlight this. It's this will get you into going somewhere farther. It's super important. Seriously.
So, folks are wanting to know where can they engage with you? Where's the best place to send folks?
Well, directly, I don't contribute much directly with people, but my full name is Mark Deop, Deop. If anybody's interested, in Fedora in particular, just join the Matrix room for KDE. I'm there. I monitor it constantly. I'm in multiple rooms, especially KDE and Fedora rooms, amongst other things, but mostly those. So there, just drop me a line on Matrix and we can chat. It's very easy, very, very easy. Yeah. I have a blog also that I don't write too much on it, but sometimes I try. It's blog.markdeop.com. And I have some things there. I mostly post some Fedora stuff, like announcements. But I do also have some Git or terminal based things because I'm a terminal junkie. So, yeah.
Very cool. We appreciate having you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's very proud of being here and having a chat with you guys. Very entertaining.
Awesome. Noah, any closing thoughts?
I hope that the rest of everybody has a very geek-filled week. Go do something. Go thank a developer and hug them. They'll hate it. Do it anyway.
Well, maybe it's because I'm not a developer, but I love hugs. So
Everybody.
You're not a developer.
Well, we are at the end of our time together, but I want to thank Mark for joining us and for volunteering. Thank you very much for stepping forward and sharing this topic. This is a question that folks always have. You know, how do I get started? And even if you've goodness been doing something for close to 10 years, as we were talking in the pre-show, you know, I still ask, you know, what's the next step? What else am I missing? What else can I learn? So really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. Go check out things like VS Code. Go check out the KDE SIG. Go check out Python. Excuse me. And go check out the join link for Fedora to get involved. There's always something that needs to be done. This show is always looking for help. I know the documents team, the Fedora magazine, the any number of Fedora projects are always looking for extra help. So don't think that there's nothing you can contribute to open source. I got to tell you personally, professionally, and hobbies. I've been much more fulfilled having an open source community and a group of friends that I met there. That's really, really, really a big deal to be a part of something like this. With that said, really thank you all for joining us. Take the 1.2 seconds it takes to click that little thumbs up button. That helps juice the algorithm a little bit, so more people find the show. And be sure to share it with a friend. We'll be back next week. Actually, I will be interviewing Matthew Miller, the Fedora project lead. We've got some news to share. We've got a look ahead at. I know it'll be middle of February, but I don't care. We're still looking ahead to 2025. So definitely join me and Matthew for that conversation. Until then, I want to thank Noah, my co-host, Mark, our guest today, Noel, who's in the background pushing all the buttons and writing down chapter markers for our show notes. This episode will go out on PeerTube and on audio here in a few hours. So definitely stay tuned for that. And until then, we thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.